Good afternoon. How are you? Well, I've been to see my doctor, my ophthalmologist, and she says both eyes are good. So I'm good to go. This right eye, when it had that problem seeing because of the scar tissue, the metaphor of scar tissue, interfered with my sight. So I went from 20/80 to 20/30. That's an improvement. And so I'll go back in 3 months, although I think I got a clean bill of health. And I want to thank you out there who were pulling for me to have sight in my right eye. There's a story that I think is a cautionary tale about how government can go wrong, and does, and repeatedly for the same reason. I know I don't normally wear a cap, and I am today because I got this cap when I went to the Democratic Convention as a delegate for Hillary Clinton in 2008. And, you get stuff there, hats and t-shirts and stuff like that. And so I have a cap, and on it, it says Norfolk Southern. Can you see that? Norfolk Southern. And Norfolk Southern is the railroad that is in deep doo-doo in Ohio for derailment. Now, let's analyze this a little bit. I don't know if Norfolk Southern went to the Republican convention as well, which does happen. And when I ran for Congress years ago, there was one company that had two vice presidents, and one made contributions to the Democrat, that was myself, and the other made contributions to the Republicans, so they were covering their bets. So I haven't looked up, and I don't know what Norfolk Southern's background is. But, they support these conventions, and I assume labor did as well. And they make demands. But the responsibility when you receive a demand is to tell your friends that, no, we can't do that, but we can do this. That kind of conversation. Now, we have a short history here of recent vintage, which tells us something about how Norfolk Southern has been handled. The company, not the unions. Now, you may remember in December, we came to a point in which the Biden administration said, we're not going to wait and allow the union to strike. We're, in fact, going to stop that, take the side of the company, and prevent the strike. Now, part of the strike was about the productivity of the union members. And there were 2 of the 6 unions had a big problem with the company. Particularly, they're working 24/7, not getting any break. And the maintenance of way president, which is a title for one of the union functions, one of the actually railroad functions, spoke out the strongest about it and how things were going to go wrong. Because you can't work at this stage, being on call, on demand so much and not have it affect your work. But in addition, the railroad industry had eased off some of the devices and practices that protect us from things going wrong. Brake systems, there are a whole series of requirements for the individual containers, cars that may contain things like vinyl chloride, which is a carcinogen, which can cause problems up to and including the death of your liver. So this is pretty serious stuff. And but there are other intervening events. In my opinion, the White House had no business interposing itself when there was a law that clearly allowed the union to make a strike. And had that happened, maybe some of those reforms would have avoided what ultimately happened. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So we have the strike. Then on February the 3rd, we have a derailment involving, I think it's 141 to 150 cars on a train. And 5 of them contain vinyl chloride. And of those, they did something really interesting that I've never heard done before. They took the 5 cars or containers of vinyl chloride and they put it in a pit and they burned it off, thereby putting into the air this vinyl chloride. It had also leaked into the waters, and it was in the ground. It was also in the ground. So you have a triple threat. And then almost immediately, the people in the area, they see that fish are dying, farm animals are affected, and so forth. Some move away, some can't. And over time, people are developing headaches and nausea and more, and rashes. So what's going on here? Well, the railroad apparently didn't follow the precautions or keep us safe. And then they took steps that seemed to me to maybe be destroying the evidence and endangering an entire community. And I posted today one man who was screaming, upset, as he looked up into the sky and saw clouds of this dark smoke, which were not clouds, natural clouds. They were the vinyl chloride, and they were the butyl acrylate, and they were phosgenes, and they were hydrogen chloride. All these things were up in the air. But I remember hearing, and you may have heard it too, that they said, oh, don't worry about it. You can breathe the air. Oh, don't worry about your water. It's okay. Those were lies. Now, as a kid in New York, or older than that, there was the Love Canal, which was similar and different in terms of poisons being released into the community and affecting children and adults and so forth, of course with cancer. And here we are again. Do we learn anything? Now, this happens on February the 3rd, and, I didn't focus on it until the last couple of days. But now I realize that, well, basically we're lying to the public, and we appear to be shielding the railroad and ignoring what the union members said was possible and likely. And this reminds me of the PATCO strike, in which the union, which was not allowed to strike, but did instead of a work rule, was complaining about the safety of the system they were using to keep track of planes and so forth. Now, to this day, we have problems with the air traffic control system. So, what should have happened here? Well, there should have been special aid immediately granted to the state. And yeah, DeWine's a Republican governor, but the call is a right and fair one. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the danger that's going on. There have been weak offerings, and Buttigieg was a guy I have a lot of respect for, and we'll have to see how this turns out. But his answer is, we have to put more rigid requirements in place, and sort of blaming Trump for what he failed to do. But a long time, we've had a Democratic administration that could have done something about this and did not. And it goes back to the first question, this cap. Does this cap have anything to do with the association of these bad policies? And if what's going on the ground isn't enough, on February 16th, the Department of Justice, so-called, went into court to try to kill a suit by a sick railroad worker who was affected by these toxins, and they said companies shouldn't have to worry about that. Now stop the music. We can stop protections for individuals receiving damages for being exposed to toxins by a careless company, but we can't find the time to do anything against Trump. So all these are little stories that tell us that we the people are on the wrong side of this equation. What will the Supreme Court do? I don't know. Why is the Department, so-called of Justice, taking this position? Is it to favor, dare I say it? Now, am I blasting Democrats? No. What I'm doing is I'm blasting a system of lobbying for favors for the business class, for Wall Street, not for Main Street, not for the people who work, not for the employers. employed. And that's what's going on here. And in my experience on the Hill, the way to handle this problem, and it is a problem, is people come to you on the Hill with strong opinions about what should happen that favors them. And they may be unconcerned about unexpected outcomes. Okay, give them the benefit of the doubt. It's your job on the hillside of that equation to know enough to push back, even if you want to call them your friends, to push back on those petitioning you to say, no, we can't do that. We can do this. We can't do that. There's not enough of we can't do that. The government has become pliable. It becomes obedient to the roar of the contributors to these politicians so they can, in the words of Mel Brooks, keep their phony baloney jobs. I'm a Democrat through and through, but I don't believe that you're a good Democrat if you're silent when you see the government has got it wrong. We're having wall-to-wall coverage today on what's happening in Ukraine, the terrible things that are happening. How many people do you think are going to be affected by this disaster by the railroad? And how long is it going to take? And what money could take care of that mother who said she wonders if she'll ever see her daughter at a wedding? This is just not acceptable. This is crime, or damn close. And we the people have to say, hey, cover what's going wrong here right at home. Yes, I support Ukraine too, but right now we have a big story in America and it's not being covered right. I had to dig around, probably you have too. You look on YouTube and you look at some different publications to find out what's going on. But the killer is the EPA has written a letter to the railroad company saying you have these toxins and you're on your way to becoming a Superfund site. So what do I think the White House should do? What do I think Buttigieg should do? What do I think Congress should do? They should forget blaming back and forth and get aid into that area and isolate it and do what they can now after the fact. But you see, this fits another normalized pattern that we don't like to admit. We allow this shit to spoil out. Oil in the Pacific, in the Gulf of Mexico, off Alaska. We don't care if we're draining major lakes and water sources. And then the governments don't do anything to lessen their demand on the water so that the ultimate terrible disaster doesn't occur. But let's put that aside. Let's deal with this disaster right now. This is a shame and a disgrace. And how America can criticize any other nation state, even about how they conduct war, when this is how we conduct peace. So, I don't know. There's more to be said about this. And I hope this is not going to be another one of these normalized disasters in which we fail to act. And this hat, throw that away. We don't need that shit anymore. So, here I am in my cathedral of trees, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Maybe there'll be better news. Bye-bye.